Hi again. My name is Rachel Stern. I'm the founder and managing partner of Govtech Ventures. And we're back with Michael Smith again, who is a longtime Govtech operator and thought leader, and actually has a great blog that I'm going to put below in the comments. And Michael had a blog post recently that I thought was particularly interesting for Govtech founders. It's around how to build realistic Govtech forecasts and go to market forecasts. The idea is not to be pessimistic, not too optimistic, but accurate in a way that really helps you run your company better and communicate better with investors. So, Michael.
Yeah, and the good news is once you understand how government timelines actually behave, forecasting becomes much more predictable and a lot less stressful.
So, in the blog, you break government sales down into three predictable waiting periods. Let's start there.
Yeah, three lags show up pretty consistently in almost every deal when you're in GovTech. Number one, decision lag. Your champion says we're in, but internal approvals still need to line up. It's really important to remember champions get your interest, coalitions get your contracts.
Mhm.
It takes time to work your way through that coalition. Number two, procurement lag. Procurement, legal, budget, council processes, everything that follows the yes. And administrative lag. Vendor onboarding, signatures, purchase orders, invoicing setup, aka the vendor packet. When you account for all three of those lags, for the forecasting process becomes much easier and your forecasts immediately get far more accurate.
Yeah, I tell founders all the time that forecasting isn't about being right. It's about running the business well and sort of bringing your investors and your stakeholders, internal and external, along with you. So, accurate reality based forecasts help you make cleaner hiring decisions and actually project runway to avoid
Right.
fundraising under pressure and keeping your investors aligned and confident and setting targets for your sales team that they can actually hit and not just kind of constantly undermining their efforts. And just generally avoiding the emotional roller coaster of we're about to close every quarter. You can't really control the government space, but you can control how you plan around it. So give us an example of what realistic forecasting looks like in practice.
Yeah, sure. Here's a fairly typical example. A team, let's say, gets a verbal yes on a $120,000 annual subscription. Instead of assuming a quick close and including it in your forecast for that month, you should ask some simple questions. Things like, who all needs to approve this? Or what procurement path will this use? Sole source, RFP, cooperative purchasing partners, etc. And what is the new vendor process? Can we get started on that vendor packet now? For example, a lot of times you can. That will give you a much clearer, more practical range. So in this case, let's say decision lag is 1 to 2 weeks, procurement lag is 6 to 8 weeks, and administrative lag 2. So you end up forecasting 10 to 12 weeks from the verbal yes to the actual booking. So less surprises, and your hiring and budgeting stay much more aligned.
Well, sometimes things actually move a lot faster than these founders expect, which is the best case scenario. What does that look like?
Yeah, and my last startup, we definitely figured out a way to kind of strategically move deals along as fast as we could. So let's say in a small county, they want to pilot a $40,000 tool tied to a federal grant that they need to obligate this quarter. They already know you as a vendor, and the product doesn't touch any sensitive data. That ends up changing everything for you. Your decision lag might just be a few days, the procurement lag 2 to 4 weeks, and administrative lag maybe a week. So that's a 5 to 7 week close instead of a 10 to 12. And it happens because the conditions support speed. A
Yeah.
structured model makes those situations visible instead of surprising.
Yeah, I think it's so important to pattern match across your opportunities. And we talk a lot in these weekly videos around sort of procurement thresholds and deciding whether or not you want to do enterprise sales or individual sort of pilots to sales,
Mhm.
but your pricing informs that too. All of this informs your pricing really too, and how you're going to go to market. So let's give founders a really clean way to apply this.
Yeah, there's maybe kind of five key points to that. Number one, anchoring on the decision date rather than the verbal yes.
Mm,
That isn't always the case,
great
but
point.
if you can anchor on the decision date, that will make your forecast far more accurate in doing that. Number two, estimate those lags that we just talked about separately instead of assuming one smooth process. And I break this down on my site in more of a mathematical way to give you more of a framework to do that. Using ranges, not single dates, self-explanatory, but at times we might get stuck in being pushed for dates. Use ranges. No one knows the exact dates, hard to predict. I would say updating those ranges as you learn more. We've all been there where a close date gets entered in the CRM, when the deal gets created or shortly thereafter, but then as you learn more, it's not kept up to date. And so your forecast, your VP of sales, your executive leadership might be referencing something that's out of date. And last, I would say to share those ranges. As those ranges get updated, share that with your team, with your leadership, with your investors, so everyone's expectations stay as aligned as possible. Once you adopt that type of model, your forecasts become far less emotional and way more operational.
Totally. When you can understand the mechanics of government timelines and incorporate them into your existing internal infrastructure, you can plan better, you can operate better, and you can bring investors along with the clarity you need instead of a bunch of surprises.
Yeah, and forecasting stops being a guessing game that often slips and starts becoming more predictable and more of a process.
Thank you so much for coming, Michael. Check out his blog post below. Thanks.